From the KUAM Podcast Network, this is Rlene Live, with conversation on island issues facing Guam and the Northern Mariana Islands. Now, here's Rlene.
Okay, so today is the 29th of May 2019, and I have the distinct privilege of being in a Fanihi cage with two scientists. I'm going to have them introduce themselves. Please tell me your name and your role here in Luta.
My name is Dr. Joshua Guilbert. I'm the Rota Field Supervisor, so I basically run the Fish and Wildlife Office on the island with 3 other staff members, hopefully soon expanding to 5. And I'm also in charge of any of the bat conservation efforts we have for the Fanihi and also for the sheath-tailed bat, which is found on Goat Island between Tinian and Rota.
Okay, and also?
Hi, I'm Dr. Rebecca Hamner. I'm a wildlife biologist, and I've been helping out with the care of the orphaned Fanihi that we have here.
Okay, and she's really not announcing this, but she's also the spouse of Dr. Guilbert. Okay, so Dr. Guilbert, please give us a highlight of these wonderful creatures that are here in Luta. My heart aches when I look at them because they used to be on Guam, and now they're really endangered there. But thank you very much for allowing me this opportunity. Give us an idea of your work here in Luta and about the Fanihi.
Okay, so I'm basically in charge of doing all the monitoring here on the island. Rota is the stronghold of the species. We have quite a few bats. At the moment there's 3 main colonies, but elsewhere in the Marianas Islands they're not doing very well at all. If we could replicate what's happened on Rota elsewhere, we could actually get the species delisted, which is part of the requirements. We need, out of the 5 southern Mariana Islands, we need to have stable to increasing populations, and we only have that on Rota. Although last year with the typhoon that came through, Mangkok, it dropped down the population by a couple of thousand. So we're going out now and doing more monitoring. They've just reformed back into colonies just to see how bad that drop has actually been. These bats used to be found throughout the Mariana Islands, but now on Guam there's around about 50 or less than 50 normally. Although just after that typhoon, a few of the Rota bats probably flew over to find food over there, since Rota got pretty much stripped bare. Guam also used to have the little Mariana fruit bat, which was about half the size, and it's unfortunately is now listed as extinct. The bat population on Rota has been seesawing over a number of years, so next year we're hopefully seeing where the locals are about that, and we'll be conducting some surveys with local hunters and conservationists to see what their understanding of the current bat population is, and that will be done by the Marianas College. They'll be basically acting as a firewall, conducting the interviews, so we don't have direct contact with the locals, so people will be more willing to speak freely. So once a month we go out to each colony and we count how many bats are there hanging in the trees, and then we plot that over the year to see what the yearly trend is, and then we take the yearly average and we can plot that to see what the trajectory of the bat colonies are. If anyone ever finds an injured bat or an orphan bat, they can turn that into us, no questions asked, and then we hand rear them and then try to release them back into the wild. So we have 2 bats at the moment. One is called Jenny. She's a cute little female, which is currently chewing on my fingers. And the other one is Bam Bam. And they were both turned into DFW. They were bottle fed, and then they get a piece of fruit each day, along with some formula milk and some bat protein mix. And eventually we'll be releasing them into the wild, and hopefully they'll become part of the breeding population and help boost the numbers.
After the typhoon, you said Mangkok? How stressed were the Fanihi?
Pretty bad. The normal pattern for the bats, in the evening they'll fly out, they'll fly all over the island, you'll see them everywhere, they'll forage, and then early in the morning they'll come back to the colony and roost up, and they roost together in numbers. But immediately after the typhoon, one of the colonies' numbers completely dropped right down because they lost a whole lot of roosting trees, and another colony neighbouring had an increase of numbers. And for the first week, you've just got a bat on you, and I know you're allergic to him. Get up.
Yeah.
No.
He's been trying to do that since I got in this cage.
What did we say?
What can I say? I attract bats.
No. Bad bat.
Yeah. Stay there, Bam Bam.
So, sorry, where was I?
You were at the... It's okay. Let it go. Yeah, I don't want to traumatize it.
So,
you were talking about right after about how they were depopulated in one colony and the other one increased.
Yes, and then so for the week or so after the typhoon, the bat population was okay because there's still plenty of fruit around. It's just on the ground, and they'll climb down to the forest floor to feed on that. But after all the fruit rotted, they were in deep trouble, and so quite quickly the colonies were abandoned. And what we started seeing is the bats spread out throughout the forest and not travelling as much as they could, as they normally do. I think this was to conserve the energy reserves. And what we'd find would be small groups of bats that would be basically resource guarding on pandanus, that most of the pandanus fruit managed to stay on the vine. So they'd wait for the pandanus to ripen, and then you'd have this feeding frenzy where a couple of times I would drive past and there would be 20 or 30 bats just pulling this one pandanus fruit apart in
desperate.
It looked like a Black Friday sale at Walmart. So that allowed us to actually catch a few of them by hand with hand nets, and we would attach these GPS trackers to them. And what we basically ended up seeing was that the bats would stay in one area, and then every so often they may fly a couple of miles, and then they'd be back in the same space over the next couple of days. But now, around about end of March, beginning of April, they've reformed back into colonies, and they're...
It's okay, let her go. Just let her go. I can handle it.
Well, they've reformed back into colonies, and now counting them's a lot easier. If there's no more typhoons this year, the population should make a bit of a bounce back over the next couple of years. But the problem is with climate change we're going to get more and more typhoons that are stronger. And that's going to cause a major problem to all of the Mariana Islands, Guam included. Because as there's more energy and heat in the system, that fuels the typhoons to become larger and larger. You can't say any one individual typhoon is because of climate change, but what we can say is the frequency of the large typhoons are going to increase, which is bad news for all of us.
Okay. You said that one colony minimized and the other one increased. Did they join to the other?
Yes, that's what we think happened. That basically those big trees fell, so the bats had to have somewhere to hang, so they ended up hanging next door. And there has been rumours of large sightings of bats on Saipan. Tinian has never had very good forest on it because most of it was basically clear-felled during World War II. And we haven't had anyone go out to Goat Island in a while because it's kind of difficult to get out there, so I'm not too sure what the population's doing there. But we'll be going out there next year, hopefully, to do some sheath-tail bat work, and while I'm there, I will do some fruit bat counts.
So without the impact of typhoons on their lifespan, what is the lifespan of a Fanihi? We
think around about 15 to 18 years based on what the other species in the genus do. Microbats live a lot longer. We know of small insectivorous bats that have lived up to 40 years. Although I shouldn't actually say microbat anymore because they've done the genetics and apparently they're one big group with the fruit bats nested in the middle. So the idea of micro and megabats has been discounted, but old habits die hard. So small insectivorous bats will live longer than the fruit bats.
Old habits die real hard. I'm holding a recorder rather than my video camera, and what I'm seeing are these bats that are less than a pound just climbing all over you like you're some kind of pandanus tree.
This is Rlene Live, and we've got more coming up in just a moment.
Hey everybody, and what is going on? Jason Silas here with KUM Digital, and I'm going to get you right back to your show in just a moment, but I am popping in to let you know about the amazing opportunities you have to sell your brand, get customers for your service, or promote your event on all our library of podcasts on the KUM Podcast Network. Our shows have global distribution and are sent to all the major podcast directories and devices, from mobile phones and tablets to laptops and smart speakers to integrated TVs, and all on demand. By running an audio ad on the KUM Podcast Network, you'll guarantee timely exposure and market penetration for your stuff and see immediate results no matter what your end game or actionable items are. You want to drive downloads for a cool new app that you've built? Done. Want to see your restaurant gain an instant surge in foot traffic? Easy peasy, man. Does your business need some sort of boost? All you got to do is plug a promo code that ties into an incentive and see measurable, tangible results that very same day. Podcasting is the internet's fastest growing ad platform, and you can reach customers and partners now. To find out more about our ad opportunities and how podcast plugs can work for you, get in touch with us at podcast@kuam.com. Just think about it. Your ad could be running right here instead of my shrill voice, and your business would have a big leg up on the competition. So don't let this opportunity to connect with customers, extend your reach, and increase your effective exposure pass you by. Get in touch with the KUM digital marketing experts by emailing podcasts@kuam.com, that's podcasts, plural, at kuam.com, and let us put together an effective marketing plan for your stuff, just like this ad has been. See what I did there? All right, everybody, we're going to talk to you soon, but for now, let's get you back to this podcast.
Now, more Rlene Live on the KUAM Podcast Network.
Yeah, I've been trying to minimize how much time I spend in here. This is a new development that they've started doing this, which is kind of giving me some cause of concern because when we release them, we don't actually want them seeing people as being friendly. We want them to stay away because we do have some illegal hunting still on Rota.
How bad is that?
We don't actually know. That was one of the things we want to find out next year to actually quantify what sort of effect that has. But I get told different things from different people. One of the common threads is that it's actually decreasing. That most of the younger generation aren't really interested in eating bat, which is good news for the bats.
Yes.
But ultimately, the Fish and Wildlife Department wants to see the species delisted, and when that happens, cultural harvest can actually be reinstituted.
Wonderful. So we want to get the colony up to what size? What size would the Fish and Wildlife be comfortable with taking it off the endangered list?
That would be a group discussion above my pay grade, but I know the thresholds that have been set so far, as I said, is in the lower 5 islands, so that is Saipan, Tinian, Guilbert, Rota and Guam. 3 of those islands must have a stable to increasing population, and so far we only have that on Rota. Now that's a combination of a number of things. Guam has the the snake, which is a major problem there, and so that I think that's reducing the numbers of bats we can have on Guam. Rota is the best island because it has not just because I live here and I love it, but because it doesn't have this brown tree snake, and it also has a lot of untouched forest, which
undeveloped.
It's undeveloped. Even
great habitat.
Even during World War II, apparently the Americans, when they came through to clean out the Japanese from the islands, fired a few rounds. No one fired back, and they just kept going. So Guam, Saipan, and Tinian were where the main fighting was, and there was a lot of bombs dropped. A lot of forest demolished. The next island up is quite small, so it wouldn't be able to hold much of a population. Tinian has a very low forest quality, and Saipan is chock-a-block full of people. But again, there should be more bats on Saipan, I think, than what there currently are.
Well, when they get healthy, they'll just naturally populate the islands, won't they?
Well, they once they reach carrying capacity. So you've got this idea in biology called carrying capacity, which is basically the maximum number of individuals that an environment can handle, that can keep. And if the limiting factor is the amount of food that is available, and then each generation, there'll be a certain number of bats that will fly out to the other islands to establish there. So Rota definitely is not at full carrying capacity yet when it has not been ravaged by a typhoon. When it has, that may be one of the mechanisms that have caused the bats to spread out throughout the Marianas Islands. In the past, like 1,000 years ago, typhoon comes through, so they'll just pick up and go to another island for a while until the habitat improves again, and some of them would stay there.
Okay. Now tell me about mating and what do you call it when they have offspring? Is it
Pups.
Pups. Okay.
Yeah.
So how often do they mate, and how many pups do they have at one time?
Well, as far as we can tell, they just have one pup. Most of bat species, that's the case, but there are a few that will have triplets or even up to triplets. But this is mainly because mum, for quite a long period of time, is carrying the baby around with her. And even when it weighs up to half her own body weight, she'll have this little baby tucked underneath her wing. So obviously you don't want to have twins if that's what you're doing.
What's the incubation time?
I'm not too sure. We would actually have to do some studies on the species to find out when they implant. Okay. Various animals throughout the animal kingdom can do different things. Like some, like with humans, as soon as there's been a mating, the embryo implants straight away, and we don't hold on to it. But there are some species that the females will store the sperm for later. There are other species that you'll have fertilization, and then basically the embryo gets held in a suspended animation. So it all depends on the species and what it requires.
So we don't know what it is with bats?
No, well, we do for different species, but okay. I wouldn't...
Not for Fanihi.
I wouldn't want to say exactly what they're doing.
Well, I'm going to follow you closely. I'm going to be interested in that incubation part, because one question that pops into my mind is once they, fertilize and they hold it in the sac, do they continue to mate, or do they stop mating?
Oh, they stop mating.
Okay.
Like once the female's pregnant.
Okay.
But the matings for fruit bats, it's basically one male will have like a little harem of females in one of the trees. Like he'll essentially own a branch, and he'll shoo other males away. And then the male will wrap his wings around the female, and then they'll breed multiple times. Every half an hour or so.
How many females to a male?
Depends on how suave that male is.
Stud of the month.
Stud of the month.
Yeah, okay.
So that basically means that females are a limiting factor for the population.
Yeah. Survival rates, Josh.
It's one of the things we'll be looking at getting into. We would like to start putting thumb tags on.
Okay.
So if you look at the wing here, bats come from the genus Chiroptera. Sorry, the order Chiroptera, which essentially is Latin for hand wing. So you look at the arm, that little claw out the front, that's their thumb, and then each of those are the fingers that kind of extend out.
Right.
So on that thumb, we can put stainless steel bands of different colours, and we put so we've got metal, which will have the number of the bat on it, and then red, orange, green, so on.
To identify them?
On them. So you can have 2 on each thumb, so that gives us a 4 thumb code. And which side you put the metal band on will indicate whether or not it's a male or a female. So I like to think that I put the males on the left-hand side, because my wife's always right.
Oh, I like that.
And so when you're out in the field, if you ever do see one of these bats with a band on it, try to work out which wing it's on.
Oh, no.
And when you write down the combination, you go from the top of the thumb down to the ankle. So that would, if it was at the very top next to the end of the claw, that'd be metal green, and then you put a slash, and then go to the top of the other thumb, orange blue, for example.
And that'll tell you male or female.
That will tell us male or female, and the code for which individual bat that is. So what I'm hoping to do is that if Guam also does this, we'll agree on some sort of standardized method, and that way if I ever see a Guam color combination on Rota, I'll know that I've got a Guam bat here.
Wonderful.
and vice versa, and then maybe using that and people calling in, we can track them. That'll also allow us to track longevity. Even if someone finds like a dead bat on the side of the road with the tag on it, they could, if it's smelly, I understand not wanting to pick it up, but they can tell us exactly where it is. We'll come and get it. And then we can start working out exactly how long they're surviving in the wild here.
Don't go away. There's more coming up with Rlene Live on the KUAM Podcast Network.
What's up, fellow online addicts? I'm Asha, and it's literally my job to scour the internet every day to see what you guys are saying about our stories and to see what you're snarking on. If you got beef with a particular island issue, we'll give your voice an extra boost on Trend Spotting. It's our weekly rundown of everything that's got you buzzing and what conversations you can't look away from. From the serious to the silly, from ludicrous news to legit headlines, from the weirdest Instagram posts to the most retweeted stories to the insane DMs we get, we're going to show you the deeper side of what's making group chats, what's trending, and what you're sharing. So check out Trend Spotting on YouTube, on Facebook Live, and on IGTV, all at KUAM News. If you've got something to say, sound off. We'll find you. And now, back to your show right here on the KUAM Podcast Network.
Now, back to the conversation with Rlene Live.
I like the caution that you tell them that even if they see the bat in any condition, turn it in and no questions asked.
Yes.
And that really encourages partnership, right?
Yes. I'm part of the scientific side of thing. I'm not enforcement. So if I walk around the corner and I see someone poaching, I have to report that in. I don't have a choice in that. But I'm not out to find anybody. Right. If you're silly enough to get caught, then it's on you. Yeah. But my mission is not to even stop the poaching. That is somebody else's job. My job is to do the science behind it and work with the local community to see the numbers increase.
How long have you been on Luta?
I'm a year and a half now. Really? So I started February last year. I love it. I actually come from a little island as well in New Zealand. It's not tropical, so it's a lot colder there. But it feels a little like home.
New Zealand's a beautiful place, Josh.
Oh, it's gorgeous. We don't have any fruit-eating bats, though. Yeah. Well, again.
I really enjoyed being there myself. Did you want to add anything to this discussion? Did he miss anything?
He's done a great job.
Since the wife is always right.
Yeah. He's the bat biologist. Yeah. I mainly helped out taking care of these guys when they were really little. Okay. They would fit in the palm of your hand, and they would just curl up and snuggle in. Because when they're that small, their mom, as he said, carries them around. She'll fly around with them. So they need that contact and security so they don't feel abandoned.
Now, there's one right now on your back. Is that what it's doing?
It is. It's crawling on my head at the moment. Right. Yeah, as I say, I raised these guys since they were tiny, and they seem to enjoy climbing on me.
You look like you have a new hairdo.
Yeah.
Yeah. So if you have to discourage them from doing that, or they won't make it, right?
We are going to discourage that. They had gone through a phase when we first put them out in this outdoor enclosure where they wouldn't fly onto us, and we thought that was great. But now they're kind of used to the area, and they're like, "Oh, you keep coming back and feeding us, so we like you. We want to hang out with you."
They're imprinting. Is that what they call it?
Yeah. Yep.
Imprinting. Yeah.
So we've got bat dad and bat mom here, but we don't want them to do that in the wild. I mean, they've got very sharp claws, so as you'll see, I keep shielding my eyes.
Well, I felt it when they got on my back. Yeah.
So we don't want them flying onto people hiking in the forest. Definitely not someone that wants to take them home.
Right. So. All right. So when will you release?
We're hoping soon. So for species similar to them, they'll stay with their mom for like 6 months to a year. So they'll be about a year at the end of August. We also want to make sure that they're heavy enough to carry a transmitter so we can see where they're flying to after they go. And I think they're actually both just above that threshold now. And then, we had that big typhoon. So the forest got flattened, the fruit, was not around. It's coming back now, which is great, but we want to make sure there's enough food out there for them to eat when we set them free.
Yeah. So when you start tracking them, you will be literally invading a colony, right? You'll be able to get...
No, so it actually, and again, this is Josh's project, but...
So you're just going to see where they're going?
The transmitter is on them, but you can download the data remotely. So we just have to get, I don't even know what it is, within... is it 200 meters or something? So you can stay far away.
Even further than that. I've downloaded over like 800 meters or further to get actually probably even a couple of kilometers in ideal conditions. It depends on, a lot of radio telemetry depends on the angle that the transmitter is on, and the weather conditions at the time, and whether you have a direct line of sight between you and the transmitter. Like all those things will decrease the distance that the transmitter can fire off. But we can't, when we're doing the counting, for example, we can't approach the bats in any direction that would allow our scent to go into the colony. When that happens, the entire colony will flush, and that is a terrible thing, especially if there is babies there, because quite often in the panic, mum will drop the baby, and then you lose the recruitment of that individual for the next year. If the mother doesn't come back and grab it, it's gone. And so I think that when we were talking about cultural harvest before, the fact that people were eating fahini wasn't the problem. It was the way they were being harvested and the numbers. And so with shotguns and that sort of thing, you could come to a colony and collect a large number quickly, but you'd also cause a lot of the babies to drop, and as a result the population just couldn't handle that sort of methodology and hunting. That we haven't had a colony poached on Rota for quite a number of years, so I think even the people who may be out there hunting illegally understand that, and so that gives me some hope for the future, that even if we can't agree, we can minimise the long-term impacts, because the hunters want to conserve them forever as well.
Sure.
It's just that we have a small disagreement about exactly how to go about that.
And how often. Yeah. Eventually
one day they will be delisted, but for example, the grey wolf was delisted in North America, and then it wasn't managed properly and then was relisted again. So if they do get delisted, that doesn't mean we can suddenly just go back to how it was before last time.
There has to be an adjustment.
It has to be. And that's one of the things that we want input back from the hunting community. What restrictions or rules would they think would
could
be
they support, right?
Could they support? What would they be good idea? Some of them may actually have some things we haven't thought of that we'll be like, hey, that's a great idea, let's do that. So we want that feedback, and that's, again, another reason why it's coming through the college, is so there's that firewall, people can freely speak. The other thing was we want to talk to non-hunters as well, for two reasons. Everyone's opinion in the Marianas Islands, I think, is important. The other reason is if someone takes part in the survey, they can plausibly say, I'm one of the non-hunters that spoke to them. So they'll have the anonymity. They'll also be able to say that they were part of the non-hunting group, even if they weren't. And we'll get everyone's opinions and ideas about how to proceed.
Stay where you are. The conversation continues with Rlene Live when we come back.
Start your day the KUAM way with our new streaming shows on Facebook Live each weekday. Here's your starting lineup. Mondays will give you a glimpse into our morning meetings with the KUAM news team. Tuesdays, join our group chat with Chris Barnett. Wednesdays, it's crime time with the island's law enforcers. Thursdays, get the latest info with Dave Delgado, who's in the zone. And Fridays, we get Fit AF, fitness and fun. And the best part, all our shows are completely interactive, so you're directly part of the conversation. Join us Monday through Friday starting at 9 a.m. Start your day the KUAM way.
The conversation continues now on the KUAM Podcast Network with Rlene Live.
So can you explain what you just did for us there, Josh?
All right, so we came up into Sabana, and we're along one of the cliff lines looking down onto the bat colony from above. And so we're downwind from the bats, so they can't smell us. And because if they smell us, they'll panic and fly away and potentially abandon the colony. And if they have any young with them, they'll drop those young, and then those young will die. So it's very important that if you ever see a bat colony, you don't approach it. You report it in for someone to come and count it, and you keep as downwind as possible from it, because otherwise you could end up inadvertently killing some young bats. So the first thing I do is scan around with my binoculars to work out where all the different groups of bats are, because there's one main cluster and two really large trees, but then surrounding them there's some like smaller groups, and as you go further out you might get a few bachelor troops in other bits of the trees. So I work out whereabouts all the bats are, and then I systematically go through and I count the number of bats in each tree. And some of the big trees I break up into smaller groups, like I'll count all the ones on one branch first and then call out that number, then move on to the next branch. Whenever possible, I count the tree twice, just to make sure I'm getting close to the same number. Sometimes some bats will be close together and you can't tell them apart. Other times there could be a shadow there that you mistake for a bat. But really we're only ever counting the bats that we can see. So all the counts that we actually do are probably a slight underestimation of the total number of bats that are there, assuming that you don't count any group twice by mistake. So that's one of the reasons why you have to be very systematic. And so we do each colony once a month, and then that gives us our monthly count, and then we average up the months to work out what our yearly average is. And so what we're not certain about is how much that they move between colonies. So we're doing some GPS tracking to work out that. So if you count colony A on one day, do some of the bats move over to colony B and vice versa, or are they only ever staying at the same colony? So we're looking into that. Also, if you count the bats first thing in the morning, are there still bats out foraging? So we generally try to do our counts around mid-morning and mid-afternoon to make sure the bulk of the bats have gotten back in. Problem is it gets kind of hot then as well. Yeah. If it's particularly hot, some of the bats may go down under the canopy cover as well. So is that affecting things? So those are the sorts of stuff that we're looking at the moment. And by counting the colonies regularly, we can track what the population's doing here on Rota. But over on Guam and Saipan and elsewhere in the southern Mariana Islands, there isn't really any colonies. The bats are roosting in small groups, and just 'cause the small numbers that there actually are. So it makes actually counting the number of bats there a lot harder. So we're going to be flicking on to doing a different method. They currently do this on Guam, where once a year Dr. Tammy Middleton, she organises the Anderson Air Force island-wide, and she gets a whole lot of observers, and people come out first thing in the morning when the bats are flying back to their roost, and every time they see a bat, they write down the number of bats, the distance and the bearing that they're on, and the direction that they're heading. And by doing that, she can work out if people at the first station see a bats heading towards the second station, she knows she's not counting the same bats twice. So, and she can use that to kind of hone in into where the bats' roosting areas are. And so we're planning on extending that to Saipan this year and next year, and hopefully starting a Saipan island-wide count. But if anyone ever sees a bat anywhere except for on Rota, because there's plenty of bats floating around here, but if you ever see a bat flying around on Guam, Tinian or Saipan, you should contact either the Department of Fish and Wildlife or Guam Da and report it in, because we really do appreciate when the citizens get involved and let us know. If you're on Rota and you come across a large colony, let us know. We think we know where every single colony is, but if a new one starts up somewhere, it's always good to know from the locals.
Okay, so what is it that creates the opportunity for them to start a new colony?
Food resources and roosting area. So at the moment, they've gone through different phases on the island. Long before my time, apparently the entire bat population was out on the wedding cake, and then a typhoon came through and they basically dispersed to the rest of the island and broke up into smaller groups.
Back when poaching was a major problem and happening quite regularly, including at the colony locations, people would come and shoot at the colony, and then they would pick up and leave and start somewhere else. So we have a whole lot of historical colonial sites where people have seen the bats in the past. Around where the bird sanctuary was, just before I turned up, there used to be a colony there, but it slowly dropped down in numbers over time, and then the other colonies increased in number. So we think what was happening there just wasn't enough food resources around that area, so the bats relocated to where they were. So I think it's a combination of a suitable roosting habitat and also proximity to food resources that determines whether or not a colony will set up or not.
Okay, and did you say how often they populate? I mean, like when the mating season? Is it all year round?
We're not too sure.
Okay.
But in other species, there's like a peak season, basically timed so the pups will be popping out when there's the most amount of food. Yeah. I've been told that they've seen pups year round here, but there is a peak breeding season, and that's normally just when the fruit really starts to kick off. Around November, September time, we start seeing young bats in the field.
Okay. Anything else that you can think of? Did you wanted to point out?
No, but even if you're not keen on bats, we're always keen on people coming in, getting involved in conservation. If you want to help out the species, especially if you're coming from Guam to any of the other islands, keep an eye out for the brown tree snake. Don't be the person that has it sneak into your luggage and it gets onto one of the other islands. Go plant some trees. Ficus, mango, breadfruit, anything. It's great for the environment, not just for the bats, but also for the people to eat as well. Yeah. I'm looking forward to working with as many people as possible.
So bat promotion, right?
Bat promotion. Biggest thing anyone can really do is recycle their plastic and plant a tree. I think they're the two biggest.
You know, you'll be happy to know my mother said that her mother told her to plant a tree every day. And she literally did.
Well, there's two sayings around trees that I really like. One of them is the best time to plant a tree was 30 years ago, and the second best time is now. So
30 years ago, why?
Because it takes time for the tree to get up to actually, or maybe 20 years ago, depending on the species. Yeah. And the second one's from ancient Greece, which was a saying they had that a society grows great when old men plant trees in the shade that they will never sit. Aww. So
thank you for the shade.
Yes, thanks for the shade.
And I wish your project well.
Not a problem.
You've been listening to Rlene Live on the KUAM Podcast Network. Join her every Monday for a new edition. Log on soundcloud.com/KUAM News or listen anytime. Scroll down and click on Rlene. We welcome your feedback and suggestions. Email Rlene, RLENE, @rlenelive.com. Thanks for listening.